It was a warm Sunday afternoon in Brookridge, a suburban neighborhood just outside of Atlanta where kids laughed freely and families filled the local park. The air smelled of grilled hot dogs, and sprinklers from nearby yards hissed softly in the background. Derek Lawson, a 34-year-old software developer and father of two, stood near the jungle gym, smiling as his daughter Amira went down the slide for the fifth time in a row. His younger son Eli toddled around the swings, holding onto his toy fire truck with a determined grip. "Again, Daddy!" Amira giggled, running back up the ladder. Derek laughed. "You're gonna wear that slide out." Other parents offered friendly nods. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name, where cookouts, birthday parties, and weekend soccer games kept the community close. That peace shattered in an instant. A black and white police cruiser pulled up fast, too fast, onto the grass near the sidewalk. Its tires screeched slightly as it stopped, dust clouding into the air. Officer Ray Milton stepped out, sunglasses still on, hand already resting on his holster. He was known in the area, but not in a good way. His reputation was sharp-edged, overzealous, quick to assume, and always looking for trouble in the places it didn't exist. He walked directly toward Derek. "Sir," he barked, "step away from the children." Derek blinked, confused. "I'm their father. Is there a problem?" Milton's jaw tightened. "We got a report of a suspicious male loitering near the swings. You match the description." Murmurs rippled from the other parents watching nearby. A white couple who had just arrived froze, their toddler halfway to the sandbox. Derek raised both hands calmly. "Officer, I'm not loitering. I'm watching my kids just like everyone else here." Milton's voice rose. "I'm not going to argue with you. ID, now." "I don't have it on me. I'm wearing gym shorts. My wife is right over there." Derek motioned toward a woman seated at a bench, holding a baby bottle and now standing in alarm. But Milton wasn't listening. He stepped forward and grabbed Derek's arm. "Turn around, you're being detained." Gasps erupted from the other parents. "Wait, he didn't do anything," one man shouted. "He lives here," said another woman, stepping forward. Derek's daughter screamed, "Daddy!" as the officer forced him toward the cruiser. "I'm not resisting," Derek called out, trying to stay calm. "Please don't do this in front of my kids." But Milton shoved him harder. "You people never learn," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for nearby parents to hear. That was the moment a mother pulled out her phone and began recording. Within seconds, 5 others followed suit. Derek's wife ran over, pleading, "He's my husband. He didn't do anything wrong." Milton waved her off. "Back up, ma'am, or you'll be detained too." By now, children were crying. Parents were yelling. Phones were recording from every angle. And Derek Lawson, a father spending the afternoon with his kids, was shoved into the back of a squad car as his children sobbed. What Officer Milton didn't realize was that the playground was more than just a park. It was the heart of a tight-knit neighborhood. And by nightfall, the entire neighborhood would be on its feet. Because when injustice happens in broad daylight, it doesn't just affect one man. It awakens everyone. By the time the squad car pulled away from the playground, Derek's daughter Amira was still screaming, her tiny fists pounding against her mother's legs. Eli, too young to understand, had dropped his fire truck and stared blankly in the direction his father had disappeared. Jasmine Lawson stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding, mind reeling. Then she turned sharply and addressed the gathering crowd. "Did anyone get it? The video, please, someone tell me you got it." "We did," a man said, holding up his phone. "Multiple angles. This is going viral tonight." A young woman stepped up. "I'm uploading it right now. He didn't do anything. He was just playing with his kids." Jasmine held back tears. "He's never been arrested in his life, never even had a traffic ticket." Another voice called out, "This ain't the first time Officer Milton pulled something like this. My cousin got stopped in his own driveway last month. No reason, just looked suspicious." The anger began to spread like sparks on dry grass. Across the street, a local community organizer named Mateo Cruz had seen the whole thing. He walked up to Jasmine gently. "I'm so sorry, I live 2 blocks down. I run the community board on Facebook. If you're okay with it, we're organizing tonight." Jasmine looked at him through teary eyes. "You think anyone will care?" He nodded without hesitation. "Yes, because now we have proof. And this time, the whole neighborhood saw it." That evening, the video was everywhere. On Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, multiple angles showed the same story. A calm black father being aggressively detained in front of his terrified children for doing nothing but standing at a playground. The hashtags trended within hours. Hash justice for Derek Nashtish parent. Not perp, hash let fathers. Be fathers. News vans started rolling into Brookridge before midnight. Reporters interviewed Jasmine on her porch. She held back tears but didn't waver. My husband's name is Derek Lawson. He's a father, a husband, a decent man. And today, he was treated like a criminal for simply existing. That same night, Mateo hosted a live stream. He stood in the middle of the park, the same spot where Derek was arrested just hours before. Dozens of neighbors surrounded him, holding candles and signs. This is not about one man. This is about a pattern, Mateo said to the camera. We've heard the stories. We've filed the complaints. We've been ignored. But now the world sees us. Back at the precinct, Officer Milton sat at his desk, scrolling through the backlash. His face tightened with each headline. A fellow officer walked by and muttered, "They're gunning for you, man. Might want to lay low for a while." Milton shrugged. "It's all noise." He was acting suspicious. I followed protocol. But even he didn't believe that anymore. In another part of the city, Evelyn Carter, a civil rights attorney and former Brookridge resident, watched the footage. Her expression hardened. "I know that park," she said. "I used to take my nephews there." Her assistant raised an eyebrow. "Want me to draft a statement?" Evelyn stood up, already grabbing her coat. "No, I'm going down there myself." By sunrise, posters were taped to stop signs, flyers passed through mail slots, and online groups buzzed with plans. At 10 a.m., the park would no longer be just a playground. It would become the starting point of a movement. Because when neighbors stop whispering and start marching, change is already on the way. By 9:30 a.m., the park looked completely different. What had once been a space for swings and slides now buzzed with focused energy. Volunteers were setting up folding tables with water bottles and flyers. A group of teenagers painted signs that read, "Justice for Derek, parenting isn't a crime, and enough is enough." Mateo Cruz stood in the center with a bullhorn, directing setup like a seasoned campaign manager. He looked up as Evelyn Carter stepped onto the grass wearing a dark blazer and aviator sunglasses. "Evelyn?" Mateo called out, surprised. "I didn't think you'd actually come." "I didn't think I'd be back here this soon," she replied. "But I saw what they did to Derek. This isn't about just one arrest. It's a blueprint of what happens when no one's held accountable. And that ends today." She looked around the park, now filled with dozens of families. Who's representing the Lawsons legally? "Right now, no one," Mateo said. "Jasmine's overwhelmed, and they haven't even told her where they're holding Derek yet." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "That's illegal. Let's fix that." By 10 a.m., over 200 people had gathered. Parents, teachers, small business owners, even the local librarian stood with a cardboard sign reading, "Let dads be dads." Jasmine arrived holding Eli in her arms and Amira by the hand. A hush fell across the park as people stepped aside, letting her through like royalty. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but her voice was clear when she spoke into Mateo's bullhorn. "My husband did nothing wrong. He was playing with our kids. That's it. And yet I had to explain to my 6-year-old daughter why her daddy was taken away like a criminal. I shouldn't have to explain that. Not here, not anywhere." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Evelyn took the mic next. "We are demanding the immediate release of Derek Lawson. We are demanding an internal investigation into Officer Milton, and we are demanding that the city re-examine every complaint that has been brushed aside in this precinct, starting now." Across the street, a group of plainclothes officers watched nervously. One of them picked up a radio. "Yeah, the crowd's growing fast, and Carter's here. They've got bullhorns and banners, but it's peaceful for now." Inside the precinct, just blocks away, Officer Milton sat in the locker room, watching the protest on his phone. His fingers tapped anxiously against the bench. A senior officer walked in. "You've stirred up a storm, Milton." "I followed protocol," Milton said, voice flat. The senior officer raised an eyebrow. "Protocol doesn't usually spark citywide protests. Just so you know, Internal Affairs is already sniffing around. You might want to lawyer up." Back at the park, news crews had arrived. Mateo gave his statement to the cameras. "This isn't just about one cop. It's about a system that sees black fatherhood as a threat. We're here to change that narrative, starting with Derek." As the reporters turned to Jasmine, Amira tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Is Daddy coming home today?" she asked. Jasmine knelt, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered, "We're going to bring him home, baby, and we're not alone." The camera caught that moment and it spread like wildfire. It wasn't just about outrage now, it was about community, love, and the strength of everyday people refusing to be silenced. And as the mayor's office watched the live stream from City Hall, one advisor turned and said, "This is going to explode if we don't do something fast." Because when a family is broken in front of witnesses, the silence that follows doesn't last long. It becomes a voice that echoes across the whole city. The protest at Brookridge Park swelled by the hour. By noon, the crowd had doubled. Local news helicopters hovered overhead, capturing shots of handmade signs, locked arms, and chants that shook the neighborhood streets. "Free Derek Lawson! This is what a father looks like! We see you, Officer Milton!" Inside City Hall, Mayor Grace Dorsey stood in front of a large screen showing the live footage. She paced the floor of her office while her advisors scrambled for answers. "I want to know how this happened," she said sharply. "Why did an officer feel empowered to arrest a father in front of his kids for nothing?" An aide stammered. "Officer Milton's report claims he was responding to a suspicious person call. He says Derek matched the description." "And how convenient that the suspicious person was the only black man in the park," the mayor snapped. "I've seen the footage. I have 2 kids. That man was being a father, not a threat." The city's police commissioner, Anthony Brill, sat quietly in a corner. When the mayor turned to him, his shoulders tensed. "Commissioner," she said, voice low but firm, "you said you had this department under control, that we'd moved beyond these kinds of incidents." Brill rubbed his temple. "Milton's been written up twice before. Nothing stuck. Internal affairs dropped the ball. I'll admit that now." "Then pick that ball up," the mayor said coldly, "and if I don't see movement by tonight, I'll start asking for resignations." Back at the precinct, Jasmine sat in a waiting area, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. Evelyn Carter stood beside her, holding a manila folder with copies of Derek's employment records, parenting photos, and neighborhood witness statements. "I filed a motion to have Derek released immediately," Evelyn said. "The charges, if you can even call them that, are vague, baseless, and borderline unconstitutional." A sergeant behind the desk looked uneasy. "I can't tell you where he is. He's been moved to a holding unit downtown." "You can't or you won't," Evelyn snapped. "Because there's a federal civil rights violation developing by the minute, and if you want to explain that on CNN, be my guest." After a tense silence, the sergeant picked up the phone. Meanwhile, Officer Milton sat alone in the break room. The viral videos were now being played on national news. A commentator on screen said, "What's disturbing isn't just the arrest. It's the look on that officer's face. There's no hesitation, no humanity." Milton clenched his fists, ignoring the sideways glances from fellow officers. One young cop finally broke the silence. "You really thought no one would care? You messed up, Ray." Milton stood abruptly. "I followed protocol." "No," the younger officer said. "You followed your bias." Outside, the park crowd had begun to march. Streets were blocked with coordinated chants. Local businesses passed out water and granola bars to demonstrators. It wasn't just anger now, it was momentum. Mateo led the front line with the bullhorn. "They want us to move on. They want us to get tired. But we're not tired, we're just getting started." At that moment, a van pulled up to the edge of the protest. Federal observers from the Department of Justice stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Is this the Brookridge protest?" one asked a volunteer. "Yeah," the man replied, "and you're about to see why this place matters." The federal official looked across the crowd, at the sea of signs and voices united by one demand. Because when a community rises for one father, they end up fighting for every family. At the downtown detention center, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Derek Lawson sat alone in a windowless cell. His hoodie was stained with dirt from the park. His hands, still slightly red from where the cuffs had cut in, rested limply on his knees. He hadn't been told anything. No phone call, no lawyer, just silence. He kept replaying the moment Amira screamed. The fear in her voice echoed louder than any jail door ever could. Then, at last, footsteps. A key turned in the lock. A uniformed officer stepped in, not the one who arrested him, but someone older, more careful in tone. "Mr. Lawson," he said, avoiding eye contact, "your attorney is here. You're being moved to a holding room for legal counsel." Derek stood slowly, his voice calm but cold. About time. In the hallway, he saw her, Evelyn Carter, waiting with a folder under her arm and fire in her eyes. "Derek Lawson," she said, "I'm your attorney now, and you're about to walk out of here." Derek blinked. "Wait, what?" They had no right to hold you this long. No charges, no probable cause, no due process. Everything about this arrest was unconstitutional. I've already filed motions with the city and the feds, but before that moves forward, you're coming home. For the first time in hours, Derek exhaled. Back at Brookridge Park, the march had circled back around to the playground where it all began. Jasmine was back on the megaphone, holding a mirror, her voice stronger now. "They think this will fade. They think we'll forget. But this playground is sacred now. This is where the lie broke open. This is where the truth stood its ground." A roar of cheers followed. The local news anchors were already calling it the Brookridge Stand. National outlets were streaming live. Posters of Derek's face now joined murals of other wrongfully targeted fathers, layered onto fences and light poles. Then, Evelyn's call came in. Mateo picked up the phone, eyes wide as he turned to the crowd. "He's coming home," he shouted. "They're releasing Derek." The park exploded in applause. Strangers embraced. Kids waved signs with renewed excitement. Jasmine covered her face in relief, tears finally flowing. Not from fear this time, but from release. 20 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up on the edge of the park. The door opened, and Derek stepped out. The crowd quieted, then surged forward. But no one rushed him. They just waited, watched as he took a few steps forward and knelt, opening his arms. Amira ran into them at full speed, knocking him back onto the grass. Jasmine followed, and Eli, in her arms, reached out his small hands toward his father's face. The silence was holy. Then someone began to chant again, softer this time, almost reverently. "Let fathers be fathers. Let fathers be fathers." Derek stood up and turned toward the crowd. Evelyn handed him a microphone. "I want to thank you all," he said, voice cracked but strong. "You could have stayed home. You didn't have to come out, but you did. For me, for my family, and for every parent who's been made to feel like a threat just for loving their kids in public." A woman near the front shouted, "You're not alone, Derek." He nodded. "That's what today proves. None of us are." Across the city, the mayor received the footage. She turned to her aide. "This just went from a PR problem to a moral one." Her aide replied, "Ma'am, you need to say something, fast." She leaned forward. "Draft a public statement and tell the commissioner I want a report on Officer Milton's conduct on my desk before nightfall." That night, Evelyn met with Mateo and a group of community leaders at a nearby cafe. "We got him out," Evelyn said, "but this isn't over. What happened to Derek has happened to dozens of others in this district. It's time we open the books. Every complaint, every pattern, every voice that was ignored." Mateo leaned in. "Then let's make this bigger than one protest. Let's build something permanent. Because when a single arrest brings a city to its feet, it's not just justice being served, it's a system beginning to shake." The morning after Derek Lawson's release, Brookridge didn't quiet down. If anything, it was louder. Local news vans lined the streets. Students walked to school wearing t-shirts printed overnight that read, "Justice for Derek." A mural of his face, smiling, holding a mirror, had appeared on the brick wall of the local rec center, painted in black, gold, and hope. But inside the cafe on Oak Ridge and 9th, the conversation had shifted. The emotion was still raw, but the focus was sharper. It wasn't just about what happened to Derek anymore. It was about the system that made it possible. Evelyn Carter spread papers across the table where Mateo, Jasmine, and a few community leaders sat. "Derek's release was a first step," she said, "but not justice. Real justice means no more Dereks, ever." Mateo leaned over the documents. "What are we looking at?" "Complaints filed against Officer Milton over the past 8 years, Evelyn replied. 5 formal complaints, all from Black or Latino residents, all closed without discipline. In 2 cases, no interview was even conducted." Jasmine frowned. "And no one said anything?" "Oh, they did," Evelyn said. "They just weren't heard. Or worse, dismissed." She handed Mateo another folder. "Here's the kicker. Internal affairs reports show a pattern of inconclusive findings on nearly 72% of complaints in this district. Statewide average is 31%. Either our residents are magically wrong every time, or someone's covering tracks." Mateo whistled low. This is big. And we're just scratching the surface, Evelyn continued. There are body cam records that have gone missing. Use of force reports that were never logged. It's not just Officer Milton. He's a symptom. The infection runs deep. That afternoon, Evelyn walked into city records with a request under the Freedom of Information Act. The clerk barely looked up. It'll take a few days, she said dryly. Evelyn smiled politely. I'm sure it will. But just so you know, I've CC'd the DOJ on the request. So if it takes more than 72 hours, I'll assume someone's stalling. Across town, in the mayor's office, Grace Dorsey sat across from Commissioner Brill, whose face looked like it had aged a decade overnight. You saw the coverage, she said. It's not going away. I know, Brill muttered. I'm already preparing a statement. We'll say we're reviewing Milton's behavior. That's not enough, the mayor snapped. I want a full audit. Every complaint, every cover-up. If this department has been failing our residents, we fix it, or we rebuild it from scratch. At the same moment, Malik Turner, a young journalist who had been quietly covering police misconduct cases for years, went live on his independent news channel. This isn't an isolated mistake, Malik said to the camera. It's a blueprint, and finally, it's unraveling. What happened to Derek Lawson was recorded, but how many others weren't? How many names didn't go viral? His video quickly gained traction. Back at the cafe, Jasmine watched Malik's stream on her phone. She looked at Evelyn. What do we do next? Evelyn looked around the room, her tone resolute. We organize. We collect names, stories, videos, everything. We put pressure on every level of government until they listen. And when they pretend they're fixing it with PR, we show them the receipts. Mateo nodded. A public town hall, open mic, survivors speak. We televise it ourselves if we have to. And what about Officer Milton? Jasmine asked. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. He's not going to hide behind a badge anymore. Because one protest may change a moment, but exposing a system changes the future. 2 days later, the Brookridge Community Center reached capacity an hour before the doors were scheduled to open. Folding chairs lined the gymnasium. Extension cords snaked across the floors, connecting cameras, microphones, and portable speakers. The walls, once decorated with kids' artwork, now held posters that read, "Listen to us. This is our community. We're not asking, we're demanding." Evelyn Carter stood near the podium with Mateo, going over the schedule. Malik Turner adjusted the lighting on his live stream rig nearby. He'd agreed to broadcast the town hall live across all his platforms. This isn't a press event, Evelyn reminded everyone. No polished speeches, no prepared statements. This is raw. We let people talk. Mateo nodded. Real stories, real voices. At 6:05 p.m., the first speaker stepped up. It was an elderly man named Mr. Barnes, who had lived in Brookridge since 1972. I've seen this department change names, change uniforms, change slogans, he said, gripping the mic with a shaky hand. But it never changed the way it looked at me. When I was 19, I got shoved against a squad car for walking home from my shift. No phone, no apology, just humiliation. The room was silent. Even the cameras stopped moving. Then came a teenage girl, Amina, who recounted how her older brother had been pulled over and searched, twice in 1 week, for driving their mother's minivan after dark. My brother used to drive me to school, she said. Now he won't even drive down our street. Each story hit harder than the last. A young mother spoke of being followed by a patrol car while jogging. A teacher described the fear in his students' eyes when an officer walked through the school for a routine check. Evelyn stepped back, letting the voices fill the space. This was what truth looked like, unfiltered, uninterrupted, undeniable. At the back of the room, Commissioner Brill stood awkwardly in a suit, flanked by a pair of assistants. He wasn't scheduled to speak, but when Jasmine Lawson approached the mic, all eyes turned toward him. My name is Jasmine Lawson, she began, her voice unwavering. You all saw what happened to my husband. What you didn't see was what happened afterward. How our daughter stopped sleeping through the night. How my son calls every man in uniform bad guy now. How my husband wakes up thinking he's still in that cell. She turned toward Brill. Your department did this, and we're here to say it won't happen again. Not here, not anywhere. The crowd erupted in applause. People stood, some cried. Brill shifted uncomfortably but made no move to leave. Later, when Malik posted the full video of Jasmine's speech, it hit 1 million views by midnight. The town hall triggered a flood of new reports. People who had never spoken up before sent emails, called hotlines, submitted video clips. Evelyn's inbox overflowed. Meanwhile, Officer Milton remained on administrative leave. But sources close to the department leaked that internal pressure was mounting. Officers didn't want to be seen working next to him. His desk was empty. His locker had been cleared out. That same night, Mayor Dorsey appeared on a local news segment. "We're no longer just responding to one incident," she said. "We're reevaluating our policies department-wide, and we're listening to our residents every step of the way." But in a quiet room in city records, someone slipped a folder into an envelope marked "Confidential." Inside, a memo from 3 years prior showing that complaints against Milton had been flagged for escalation and ignored. The envelope was addressed to Evelyn Carter. Back at the Lawson home, Amira fell asleep holding her father's hand for the first time in days. Derek gently pulled the blanket over her and whispered, "They're not going to take me away again, not while the whole neighborhood's watching." Because once a community finds its voice, no system built on silence can hold. At 7:15 a.m., Evelyn Carter found the envelope slipped under her office door. No sender, no return address, just her name, typed neatly in bold. E. Carter, urgent. She opened it cautiously. Inside was a printed memo dated nearly 3 years earlier. The header read, "Internal Review. Officer R. Milton. Subject, Complaint. Escalation Recommendation, Non-Compliance Pattern." The lines that followed were damning. Subject has received multiple use-of-force complaints involving verbal intimidation and questionable stop-and-search behavior targeting Black and Hispanic males. Recommending escalation to district supervisor for formal disciplinary review. At the bottom, a note was scrawled in pen. "Review delayed per discretion of Deputy Chief Harmon. Don't stir up heat." Evelyn stared at it, her pulse quickening. Someone inside the department had tried to hold Milton accountable, only to be shut down by a superior. And now that same department had spent the past week pretending this was a surprise. She called Mateo. "I have something," she said, voice low, "and it changes everything." By noon, they had scanned the document, confirmed its authenticity through a former IA officer, and sent it to local and national newsrooms. Evelyn also shared it with Malik Turner, who wasted no time. "This isn't just negligence," Malik said in his latest stream. "This is willful suppression." They knew. They had a chance to stop Milton before he ever stepped into that playground, and they didn't. The memo went viral within an hour. At City Hall, Mayor Dorsey read the headlines on her phone with a growing scowl. Her aide hovered nearby. "You think Harmon really buried this?" the aide asked. "I don't think," she said. "I know. And if he did, we're not just talking about an officer out of control. We're talking about a department that protected him." She picked up the phone. "Get me Commissioner Brill and Deputy Chief Harmon, in person, now." Across town at the precinct, tension thickened the air. Officer Milton sat alone in an interrogation room, now officially under internal investigation. The atmosphere had changed. No more sideways glances, no more quiet sympathy. Now even his fellow officers were distancing themselves. The door opened. Internal affairs agents entered, flanked by a federal observer. "Officer Milton," one agent began, placing a recorder on the table, "you've been named in an active DOJ review regarding misconduct and procedural suppression. You are no longer considered a departmental matter. You are now a federal subject." Milton's face went pale. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Jasmine stood together at a pop-up press conference outside the Brookridge Community Center. The leaked memo in hand, Evelyn addressed the reporters. "This document proves that Officer Milton's behavior wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern protected by silence. A system chose to ignore warning signs, and that choice cost this community its trust." Jasmine followed, her voice firmer than ever. "We were told to wait, to be patient. But if we'd waited any longer, my kids wouldn't just have a traumatized father. They might not have had one at all." Back at the Lawson house, Derek watched the press conference from the couch, one arm around Amira, the other holding Eli. His phone buzzed constantly, messages of support from strangers, veterans, dads from other states. One message stood out. "I was stopped just like you. I was scared to speak. You gave me a voice." Derek stared at the screen, then looked at his daughter. "Maybe this wasn't just about me," he said softly. "Maybe it was about all of us." At City Hall, Harmon sat across from the mayor, arms crossed. He looked tired, defiant. "I did what I had to do," he said. "That memo? It was just noise. We get a dozen like that a month." "And one day," the mayor replied coldly, "that noise becomes a scream. You're suspended. Effective immediately. And if we find more like this, God help you." Outside, the community gathered once again in the park. This time, there were fewer chants, more purpose. Plans were forming. Committees, watchdog groups, legal aid clinics. As the sun set, Evelyn received another anonymous email. No message, just an attachment. Complaint log, Brookridge Precinct. Internal suppressed files. She opened it slowly, and what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Because the truth doesn't just break open, it floods. The document was 47 pages long. Evelyn Carter scrolled through the attached PDF in stunned silence. Each page was a complaint form, time-stamped, detailed, and marked internal use only, do not disclose. Names were redacted, but patterns leapt from the screen like sirens. Excessive force, racial profiling, unlawful searches, verbal abuse. Most had handwritten notes in the margins, handled verbally. Unsubstantiated, no action. Officer is well connected. Each form ended with the same outcome. Closed. No discipline. Worse still, at least 12 of the reports named Officer Ray Milton. Many predated the playground incident by years. By midnight, Evelyn had printed them all and arranged them on the floor of her office. The files formed a mosaic of silence, patterns, omissions, signatures of the same supervisors who now claimed ignorance. The next morning, she walked into a DOJ satellite office with a hard copy in hand. "I'm submitting this as part of the federal inquiry," she said, placing the document on the desk of the lead investigator. It was anonymously leaked, but every entry lines up with internal timestamps and case numbers already on record. The agent flipped through the first few pages. "This is substantial." "It's a cover-up," Evelyn said bluntly. "Long-term, institutional, and intentional. You said you wanted a broader scope? Here's your scope." That same morning, Jasmine and Derek sat down for their first joint interview on national television. The set was modest, a quiet studio, 2 chairs, soft lights, but the message was clear. "We didn't ask to become a symbol," Jasmine said. "We were just trying to raise our kids in peace." Derek added, "But now that we're here, we're not backing down. This isn't about one arrest. It's about the system that made that arrest possible and the people who let it happen." Their clip aired across 3 networks and went viral within hours. At City Hall, Mayor Grace Dorsey reviewed a crisis briefing. Her face was pale, eyes sunken with exhaustion. "How many complaints are we talking?" she asked her aide. "Dozens, all from the same precinct, and it looks like at least 2 deputy chiefs signed off on suppressing them." She closed the folder and stood up. "I need a press conference. Today. We take this head on. If we don't lead this, we'll be buried by it." Meanwhile, Officer Milton sat in the interrogation room again. Only this time, he wasn't facing internal affairs. A DOJ special counsel took the seat across from him. "This isn't just about misconduct anymore," the counsel said. "You're now being investigated for obstruction of justice and civil rights violations. Multiple counts, the kind that carry prison time." Milton's jaw twitched. "So I'm the fall guy now?" The counsel raised an eyebrow. "You're the start." Back at the Brookridge Community Center, Mateo and a group of volunteers organized files, coordinated legal aid signups, and prepared for the next town hall. "The more they resist," Mateo said, "the more truth comes pouring out. It's like they built this dam of silence, and now every crack brings a flood." Jasmine arrived holding a folder. "This came to my house this morning. No name, no note, just dropped in the mailbox." Inside, photos, copies of handwritten notes between officers. One line stood out. "Watch Lawson. He's too visible now. If he talks, it all unravels." Mateo read it and looked up slowly. "They're still watching?" Jasmine nodded. "But now we're watching back." Outside the center, more neighbors gathered, some bringing food, others offering supplies, all showing up because silence was no longer an option. As Evelyn returned to the park, a group of kids ran by with handmade signs that read, "Protect our families. No more cover-ups." She watched them, then turned to Jasmine and Derek, who had just arrived. "You ready for what comes next?" Evelyn asked. Derek looked at the crowd. "It doesn't matter if we're ready, it's already here." Because when truth rises, it doesn't knock, it breaks the door down. The next morning, Brookridge woke to a sight that felt almost cinematic. Billboards that once advertised car dealerships and fast food meals now displayed a new message. Accountability starts here. Hashtag Justice for Derek. They weren't paid for by any corporation. Local businesses had pooled money together to make it happen. A bakery owner, a barber, a daycare teacher. People who'd never spoken at city council meetings were now leading a citywide demand. At the Brookridge Library, dozens of residents gathered for an emergency community forum. Evelyn Carter stood at the front, pacing in front of a projection screen that displayed two words: systemic failure. Milton may be the face of it, Evelyn began, but he's not the whole machine. The real question is, how did this system allow him to thrive for this long? She clicked to the next slide. A chart appeared, showing complaint resolution rates for the precinct over the last 5 years. Here, she said, pointing, is when Officer Milton's complaint volume spiked, right after a leadership shuffle that moved Deputy Chief Harmon into power. Coincidence? Maybe, but then the drop in follow-up investigations? That's policy, not accident. From the back of the room, someone raised their hand. So what do we do about it? We force transparency, Evelyn said. Public audits, oversight boards with citizen seats, mandatory release of complaint stats. We treat silence like complicity. Because that's what it is. Jasmine sat near the front with Derek, Amira curled up in her lap. For the first time since his arrest, Derek didn't look cornered. He looked determined. Meanwhile, at City Hall, Mayor Dorsey stood at the podium before a bank of microphones. The room was packed. Reporters, city officials, even national outlets. This is no longer a personnel issue, she said. It's a structural crisis. We are initiating a full-scale independent review of the Brookridge Police Precinct. Effective immediately, Deputy Chief Harmon is suspended. Internal affairs will be restructured under outside supervision, and all body cam and complaint data from the last 10 years will be released to the Department of Justice. The room exploded in questions, but back at the precinct, silence reigned. Officers walked the halls with tension in their steps. Some looked relieved. Others looked angry. Whispers echoed off locker room walls. They're making us all look dirty because of Milton. No, they're finally seeing what's been happening. Someone's gonna flip. It's only a matter of time. In the break room, Officer Brenda Harlan, one of the few openly critical voices in the department, looked over her phone at a colleague. Internal Affairs wants statements, she said. They're taking testimony, off the record. I'm going in today. Her colleague frowned. You sure about that? Brenda nodded. I've been quiet too long. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the city's legal archive, an intern opened a sealed box marked Archived Complaints, 2015 to 2019. Inside were paper records long thought to be lost. At the top, a form titled Incident Playground Altercation, Officer Milton. It was dated 2 years before Derek's arrest. The name of the complainant had been crossed out. In the notes, same playground, similar report, complainant dismissed, no further action. The intern stared at it, realizing this wasn't a one-time mistake, it was a cycle. Back at the community center, Evelyn got another anonymous envelope. Inside was a flash drive. She inserted it into her laptop. A video loaded, grainy body cam footage showing Officer Milton aggressively stopping a teenage boy, barely 15, accusing him of theft with no evidence. The boy cried. Milton laughed. The timestamp was a year old. Evelyn's hands curled into fists. She looked at Derek, then at Mateo. This ends now, she said. We're taking this to federal court. Civil rights lawsuit, class action level. Mateo nodded. We've got the people. We've got the evidence. And now, Evelyn said, standing tall, we've got momentum. Because when a pattern is exposed, it stops being a story. It becomes a case. 3 days after the mayor's announcement, Evelyn Carter stood at the steps of the federal courthouse, surrounded by a growing crowd of supporters, attorneys, and press. In her hands, she held a thick legal brief stamped with the words, U.S. District Court Civil Rights Class Action. Behind her, Jasmine and Derek stood side by side, flanked by parents, teachers, veterans, and students. Many held signs, not just with Derek's name, but others too. Dozens of names. Names of people silenced, dismissed, or forgotten by the system they had once trusted to protect them. This isn't just about one arrest, Evelyn began into the cluster of microphones. This is about a documented pattern of civil rights violations, of selective enforcement, racially motivated policing, and institutional cover-ups in the Brookridge Police Department. She held up the flash drive. This footage, she said, and the records we've obtained through whistleblowers show a deeply rooted culture of abuse that has gone unchecked for over a decade. We are filing this lawsuit not just to demand justice, but to dismantle a system that punishes the innocent and protects the guilty. Reporters shouted questions. Evelyn answered each one with the clarity and confidence of someone who knew the tide had turned. "This is federal now," she said. "No more internal reviews, no more quiet settlements. It's time for truth, accountability, and restitution." Inside the courthouse, the filing was processed and entered into the federal docket. The class action named Officer Ray Milton, Deputy Chief Harmon, and the city of Brookridge as primary defendants, but it also left room to add more, pending the findings of the DOJ's now widening investigation. Back at the precinct, whispers turned into silence. Milton's locker had been cleared out. Official word said administrative separation, but everyone knew what that meant. He was done. In the break room, Officer Brenda Harlan gave her testimony to DOJ investigators. She detailed a years-long history of ignored reports, racial bias in patrol assignments, and supervisors who quietly punished anyone who pushed back. "They told me I was too soft because I didn't escalate every stop," she said. "And when I reported Milton 2 years ago, they told me to watch my tone. I've got emails to prove it." The investigators took note. One leaned in. "Would you be willing to speak at a federal hearing?" She didn't hesitate. Yes. Meanwhile, Evelyn's office became a command center. Volunteers organized witness interviews. Lawyers reviewed case law. Jasmine helped answer calls from victims, now stepping forward from across the state, each one adding another thread to the growing tapestry of evidence. At the same time, Derek met with a local nonprofit helping fathers affected by over-policing. He sat with other men, some who had never spoken publicly before. "I used to think I was alone," one father said, "that it was just me." Derek nodded. "That's how they want us to feel. Alone means quiet. Quiet means forgotten. But not anymore." Back in City Hall, Mayor Dorsey reviewed the lawsuit summary. Her expression was grim but focused. "This will go national," she said to her chief of staff. "Brookridge is about to become the face of federal reform." Her aide added, "And if we're lucky, the country listens." That evening, Malik Turner released a powerful video titled, "One Arrest, One Neighborhood, One Nation Watching." In it, he walked viewers through the entire case, showing how Derek's arrest triggered an avalanche of truth. "Some stories aren't just about injustice," Malik said in his closing words. "They're about the moment people decide to stop accepting it." As the video gained millions of views, Derek and Jasmine tucked their kids into bed, the sound of distant chants still echoing from the streets. And in Evelyn's office, the phone rang again. A quiet voice on the other end whispered, "I have more documents, but I can't email them. Can we meet in person?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Because when a system is on trial, the evidence never sleeps. The meeting place was a quiet diner on the city's east side, one of those aging 24-hour spots with cracked leather booths and fluorescent lighting that hummed above every table. Evelyn Carter arrived early, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window. Her phone buzzed in her lap, but she ignored it. 10 minutes later, a man in his mid-50s stepped in. Tall, pale, weathered face, dressed like a maintenance worker. He looked around, then slid into the booth opposite her without a word. Beside him, a worn leather briefcase. "You're Carter," he said, voice low but steady. "And you are?" she asked carefully. "You can call me Dennis. Used to work records for the department. Quiet job. Mostly filing, scanning, archiving." He tapped the briefcase. "But sometimes you see things they don't want seen." Evelyn leaned forward. "What kind of things?" He unbuckled the case and turned it toward her. Inside were dozens of manila folders, each labeled with a handwritten name and year. These are the ones that never made it into the public system. Complaints that were pulled, reworded, erased entirely. Some of the victims? Kids. One was 12 years old. Another? Shot with a beanbag round in his own yard. They buried it all. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "And you kept this?" "I did, because I knew one day someone would come along who'd actually do something with it." She opened the top folder. Inside were photos, internal emails, handwritten officer statements, and a post-it note. Handled. No noise. Her fingers tensed. "I need to verify all of this." Dennis nodded. Go ahead. I've got more, but I'll only bring them if you promise to use them. No press stunt, no political points, just truth. You have my word, she said. That night, Evelyn and Mateo sat in her office surrounded by a sea of paper. Jasmine brought sandwiches and stayed to help sort. They worked in silence, the only sound the soft rustling of truth being unburied. Every folder revealed a pattern. Familiar names, recurring language, copied and pasted dismissals. Victims who were never called back. Parents whose complaints couldn't be substantiated. Officers moved to different units quietly, records sealed. This is the real case, Mateo muttered. This is the engine behind the badge. The next morning, Malik Turner received a tip from Evelyn. Instead of his usual live stream, he released a pre-recorded video, a slow, methodical walkthrough of the hidden complaints. This isn't just a failure of oversight, Malik said. It's a blueprint of suppression, and it goes further than anyone thought. The video opened with a scanned image of a complaint filed by a mother whose teenage son was tackled in front of their house. The boy's name was Elijah. The officer listed R. Milton. The complaint was stamped closed 2 hours after it was filed. The final image, a map showing that nearly all the suppressed complaints came from the same 4 blocks of Brookridge, the poorest and most racially diverse section of the city. Public outrage reignited instantly. By noon, protests returned to the steps of City Hall. But this time, they weren't just calling for Milton or Harmon, they were demanding indictments. The chant shifted. Files don't lie. Who knew what, when? Shut it down until you clean it up. Inside, Mayor Dorsey watched the footage in grim silence. It's out now, she told her staff. All of it. And if we don't act fast, we're going to be remembered as the ones who let it rot. She stood. I want the Attorney General on the phone. Today. Meanwhile, Evelyn sent the briefcase files to the DOJ, but she held one folder back. Inside was a name she hadn't seen before. Not Milton, not Harmon, but someone higher. A name that had appeared in the margins of multiple reports, initials scrawled on dismissal forms, and copied on buried internal memos. She read the name aloud, and her eyes narrowed. Because every system has a center, and when you find it, the whole house starts to shake. Evelyn Carter sat at her desk, staring at the folder she had held back. The name written inside wasn't scribbled or hidden. It was typed cleanly on multiple memos, initialed at the bottom of sealed decisions, and mentioned in internal notes that read, Approved by DA Whitmore, no further action. District Attorney Charles Whitmore, a man known for his polished speeches, sharp suits, and repeated re-election wins. He'd built his reputation on being tough on crime, a slogan that masked his office's refusal to prosecute officers, no matter how damning the complaint. Evelyn exhaled slowly. So, that's who was protecting them. She flipped through the folder again. In one document, a complaint involving Officer Milton had reached the DA's desk after a civilian's arm was broken during a wrongful detainment. Internal Affairs recommended review, but Whitmore had written in the margin, low priority, no press, decline. Mateo leaned over her shoulder. If this gets out, it's not just about the police department anymore. It never was, Evelyn replied. Now we prove it. That afternoon, she called Malik Turner and asked him to meet her privately. When he arrived, she handed him a sanitized version of the folder, with redacted names of victims, but all DA references intact. This is your story, she said. Break it carefully. Malik's eyes widened as he flipped through the contents. They'll come after you for this. Evelyn nodded. Let them. I've already sent the full version to the DOJ and the State Ethics Board. That evening, Malik's new video dropped with a chilling title, The Prosecutor Behind the Curtain. He walked viewers through case after case, each complaint, each suppression, and each one ending in a common thread, DA Charles Whitmore's refusal to prosecute or investigate. Then he showed the statistics. In 5 years, Brookridge officers had faced 312 official complaints, 0 resulted in prosecution, and Whitmore's office had declined 94% of referrals without public explanation. The public's response was immediate and explosive. That night, protesters didn't go to the police precinct. They marched straight to the courthouse. Signs read, "The DA is complicit. Justice denied equals justice delayed." Whitmore knew. At City Hall, Mayor Dorsey received the update in stunned silence. "I always suspected the rot went deeper," she murmured. "But the DA?" Her chief of staff nodded. We've got calls coming in from state legislators. They want action. Then they'll get it, she said. Issue a statement. We support a full independent inquiry into the DA's conduct. And someone tell the governor he's about to be part of this whether he likes it or not. Meanwhile, in his downtown office, DA Whitmore watched the video play across 3 news networks. His phone buzzed non-stop. He stared at it, unmoving. Then he stood, walked to his bookshelf, and pulled down a legal volume. Inside, a small hidden compartment, a flash drive. He slid it into his pocket. At the community center, Jasmine looked up from her phone. "He's trending now," she said to Derek. "And not in a good way." Derek sighed. He signed off on all of it, while we begged for someone to listen. Mateo entered, holding up his phone. "There's a petition for his resignation. Over 100,000 signatures. In one day." But Evelyn remained quiet, still flipping through the last pages of the folder. She tapped one final document, a signed memo from Whitmore, instructing the city attorney to block all civilian review board access to police complaints. "This wasn't negligence," she said. "It was a coordinated defense." She looked up at the team around her. "Tomorrow we go public. Press conference at noon. This time it's not just about a protest. It's about prosecution. Because when corruption wears a suit and signs its name, it becomes KSA until someone holds it accountable." The next day at noon, the courtyard outside the Brookridge Justice Complex was unrecognizable. News vans lined the street, reporters jostled for position beneath hastily assembled tents, protesters held signs just beyond the barricades, their voices rising like waves in the summer heat. And at the center of it all, standing at a steel podium with the city seal behind her, was Evelyn Carter. She adjusted the mic, took a steadying breath, and began. "Good afternoon. My name is Evelyn Carter, civil rights attorney, Brookridge native, and lead counsel in the ongoing federal class action against systemic police misconduct in our city." Cameras clicked. The crowd quieted. "Over the past several weeks, we have uncovered a disturbing pattern of abuse, negligence, and silence within the Brookridge Police Department. We've traced this pattern not only through ignored complaints and falsified reports, but through deliberate suppression by those sworn to protect justice." She held up a folder. "This document contains a series of memos, all signed or approved by District Attorney Charles Whitmore. These memos show a consistent refusal to prosecute officers despite clear evidence of wrongdoing, as well as direct interference with independent investigations." She opened the folder and read aloud. DA Whitmore blocked the release of complaint records to the Civilian Review Board. He declined multiple cases involving excessive force by Officer Milton and others. In one case, a victim was coerced into silence. Whitmore was copied on the internal communication and did nothing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "We are officially requesting that the State Bar open an ethics investigation into Charles Whitmore, and we are calling on the governor to appoint a special prosecutor to review all decisions made by his office over the past 10 years. Reporters erupted with questions. "Ms. Carter, do you believe Whitmore acted criminally?" "That's not for me to decide," she said. "But I do believe he acted deliberately and dangerously." Jasmine, Derek, and Mateo stood just behind her. Jasmine's hand gripped Derek's tightly. This wasn't just about one man's arrest anymore. It was about a city's soul. Back at City Hall, Mayor Dorsey watched the press conference from her office. Her phone rang. It was the governor. "Mayor," he said, "I've seen enough. I'm appointing an independent prosecutor effective immediately, and I want Whitmore out of the building by the end of the day." "Thank you," she said. "This city needs to breathe again." Meanwhile, at the courthouse, DA Whitmore sat in his office, blinds closed, door locked. His assistant knocked twice, then entered without permission. "Sir, the governor just issued an order." "I know," he said quietly, watching Evelyn's speech on mute from his laptop. She played this well. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Burn everything with initials. They can't tie it to us if there's no paper." He stared at it, then slowly stood and walked to the filing cabinet. But it was too late. Across the street, federal agents were already entering the building with sealed warrants. In his earpiece, a lead agent gave the signal. "DA's office, we move now." By sunset, Whitmore's office was emptied. Boxes of files, hard drives, phones, all collected. The footage aired on every major news network. Breaking: Brookridge DA under federal investigation. At the community center, a cheer went up. Evelyn didn't smile. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's the middle. We've torn off the mask, now we rebuild what's underneath. Because real justice isn't just about removing power, it's about changing the hands it was never meant to hurt." The next morning, headlines across the nation carried one name: D.A. Whitmore under investigation. Brookridge justice system unravels. Cable news anchors debated the implications. Activist panels called it historic. Legal experts compared it to other civil rights cases that had shifted the course of local government. But in Brookridge, the atmosphere was quieter, tense but focused. This wasn't celebration, it was transition. At the community center, Evelyn Carter reviewed stacks of new complaints. Every hour brought more emails, voicemails, letters from people who had been afraid to speak. Until now. Some were recent. Others went back decades. An older man came in with a shoebox filled with handwritten documents. "My son," he said. He was locked up for resisting arrest, but all he did was ask why they stopped him. Evelyn opened the envelope and immediately recognized one name: Milton. Again. Across town, Jasmine and Derek sat with a trauma counselor. Not just for Amira and Eli, but for themselves. "I still wake up thinking I'm back in that cell," Derek admitted. "The lights, the silence, that officer's face." "You're safe now," Jasmine whispered. "We've made sure of that." But even she knew it wasn't entirely true. The system might be breaking open, but the scars were still fresh. At the precinct, Officer Brenda Harlan sat alone in her patrol car, waiting for her new assignment. Her fellow officers passed by without a word. Some glared, others just looked down. She had testified, she had told the truth, and now she was a target. She scrolled through her messages and saw one from Evelyn. "We're starting the Witness Protection Fund. You'll have support. You are not alone." Later that day, Mayor Dorsey stood beside state officials and DOJ representatives at a formal press conference. Her message was clear. Brookridge is entering a federal oversight period. Our department will be restructured. New leadership, new training, new accountability. Reporters raised questions about the political fallout, but Dorsey didn't flinch. "I don't care about re-election," she said. "I care about rebuilding a city people no longer fear living in." Meanwhile, in Washington, the president was briefed on the Brookridge case. A senior advisor summarized the developments. Local action triggered a federal inquiry, which exposed a decade of racial targeting and suppression. Momentum's growing. There's already pressure from 3 other cities asking for audits. The president nodded. "Let's prepare a statement. The country needs to hear what happens when communities fight back and win." Back home, Derek stood outside the park where it all started. The slide Amira loved was still there, now painted with murals of children holding hands. A new plaque had been installed at the playground gate. It read, "In honor of every voice that spoke up." He ran his fingers over the engraving. A familiar voice approached from behind. "You started this without even trying," Mateo said. "No," Derek replied, turning to face him. "We all did." That evening, Evelyn received one final message before shutting down for the night. An email from an unfamiliar name. Subject: "I worked in the DA's office. I have recordings." Her eyes widened, because when the walls collapse, even those inside start speaking. To survive or to confess. Evelyn Carter stared at her laptop screen, the subject line still glowing. "I worked in the DA's office. I have recordings." The email itself was brief, written in cautious clipped sentences. "My name is Angela Marks. I was a junior legal aide under DA Whitmore for 3 years. I witnessed decisions that buried police abuse cases. I recorded 2 conversations without permission. I was scared at the time. I'm not anymore." Attached were 2 audio files. Evelyn hesitated, checked the file safety with her IT team, then pressed play on the first. The recording crackled to life. 2 voices, both male, one of them clearly Charles Whitmore. "Whitmore, look, if we dig into every complaint, we won't have time for anything else. And some of these cases, they're not clean. The public doesn't need that mess." Unknown voice, "But there's a video of the officer hitting the kid." Whitmore, "Then lose the paperwork. If the family doesn't follow up, it disappears. We don't light fires that don't serve us." Evelyn's jaw clenched. She opened the second file. This time Whitmore was angrier, frustrated. "Whitmore, Milton's reckless, I'll give you that. But he's also loyal. He keeps his mouth shut. That's more valuable to me than a perfect record." Angela, quietly, "But what if someone calls him out?" Whitmore, "Then we bury it, just like we've done before." Evelyn sat back in her chair, heart racing. These weren't just careless comments. This was calculated suppression, captured in his own voice. And now they had him. She called Mateo immediately. "We're going public, tonight." At 8 p.m., Evelyn streamed a press briefing from the Brookridge Community Center. She played the audio files live. The room fell silent as Whitmore's voice echoed through the speakers. No more assumptions, no more doubt. This was real, and it was damning. Within minutes, national networks picked up the stream. Hashtags flooded social media. We heard him, #justice. In his own words, had tape. The system. Across town, Whitmore watched from a private residence. Not his own. His house had been surrounded by protesters hours earlier. He turned off the screen, but the damage was done. The state ethics board voted unanimously to revoke his license the next morning. The DOJ added obstruction and conspiracy to his growing list of federal charges. At City Hall, Mayor Dorsey addressed reporters. "This is the sound of a system collapsing, but from that collapse, we will build something better." Meanwhile, in the community center, Derek stood off to the side, watching as Jasmine helped Evelyn field questions from the press. Amira tugged on his hand. "Is the bad man going to jail?" she asked. Derek knelt beside her. "He's not just going to jail, baby. People are finally listening." Outside, candles lined the sidewalk. Residents stood in quiet vigil, not protesting, but honoring the truth. The atmosphere was electric and calm at the same time, like the air before a thunderstorm finally breaks. Later that night, Evelyn received another message from Angela. "There's more. Internal emails, case notes, meeting logs. I'm ready to testify on the record." Evelyn smiled faintly, exhausted but sharper than ever. "Then let's finish what we started. Because when power speaks without fear, it forgets the mic might still be on." The line to enter the Brookridge Federal Courthouse wrapped around 2 city blocks. Journalists, community members, and legal observers stood shoulder to shoulder. Some wore shirts with Derek's face, others held signs that read, "Let the people speak. We heard him, no more silence in the system." Inside, the courtroom was packed. Cameras were not allowed, but reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. The energy was electric. History was about to be written. At the front table sat Evelyn Carter, calm and prepared. Beside her, Angela Marks, the former legal aide who had risked everything to share Whitmore's recordings. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes held focus. Derek Lawson sat just behind them, suit pressed, posture straight. Jasmine clutched his hand, and across the aisle, Mateo nodded silently in support. The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. She took her seat, banged the gavel once, and said, "This court is now in session to review evidence related to obstruction of justice, civil rights violations, and systemic misconduct within the Brookridge legal system." The prosecution began by playing the 2 recordings Evelyn had released. Though the court had already heard them, the official playback in that solemn chamber made it feel heavier, final. "Then we bury it, just like we've done before." Whitmore's voice echoed again, undeniable. Angela was then called to the stand. She took a deep breath and looked directly at the jury. "I was 24 when I joined the DA's office. I believed I was there to fight for justice, but what I found was a system that protected itself at all costs." She described how complaints were rerouted, how victims were never contacted, how staff were discouraged from questioning decisions. DA Whitmore told us silence was loyalty, that if we wanted to move up, we had to follow the unwritten rules. The courtroom was silent as she continued. "I didn't speak up because I was afraid. But now, I'm more afraid of what happens if we stay quiet." The defense attempted to discredit her, claiming she was bitter after being passed over for promotion, but Evelyn calmly stood and redirected. "You said you feared retaliation. Did you receive any after sending the tapes?" Angela nodded. "Yes, I lost my job. I've had my phone hacked, and someone left a dead rat on my porch." Gasps rippled through the audience. The judge immediately called for order. Evelyn turned to the jury. And still, she showed up. Not for money, not for revenge, but because the truth deserves daylight. Outside, protesters held hands as they listened to live updates being read from phones. Elderly residents wept. Teenagers stood still for the first time in hours. Inside, the judge recessed for the day, but not before offering a rare personal remark. "This court acknowledges the extraordinary courage demonstrated by Ms. Marks and those who brought this matter forward. The people of Brookridge deserve the truth." and this court intends to hear it fully. As the crowd exited the courthouse, a new chant began. Not just guilty, accountable. Not just change, justice. Back at the community center, Amira colored on a paper while Derek watched the news recap. "She's too young to know what today means," he said to Jasmine. Jasmine smiled. "Maybe, but one day she'll ask and we'll tell her, we didn't let it end with your arrest. We let it begin. Because when the courtroom becomes a mirror, the system has no choice but to see itself." By the end of the week, Brookridge wasn't just a local story anymore. It was a movement. 3 other cities had launched internal investigations into their police departments. Hashtags like #Brookridge, Blueprint, and #Angela was right trended nationally. Civil rights organizations were holding emergency town halls. Law schools assigned Evelyn's filings as study material. Something seismic had shifted. At the Brookridge courthouse, federal proceedings continued. Testimony after testimony poured in, some heartbreaking, others infuriating. Former officers, civilian witnesses, parents, children. Each story confirmed what the public had already begun to believe. This wasn't one man's bad day. It was a system's long habit. Angela's courage had triggered a wave of new witnesses. A former administrative coordinator came forward, offering emails showing complaint tampering. A retired judge revealed he had once tried to pursue action against Officer Milton, only to be stonewalled by Whitmore's office. In the courtroom, Evelyn Carter remained methodical, calm, relentless. One by one, she connected the dots, ignored complaints, rewritten reports, suppressed evidence, promotions handed to those who played along. And always at the center sat the same names. D.A. Whitmore's legal team attempted to create confusion, suggesting inconsistencies, citing policy ambiguities, but the damage was done. Their defense was unraveling in real time. Meanwhile, in the community, change was happening just as quickly. At the playground where Derek had first been arrested, the city installed new security cameras, not to monitor citizens, but to document officer conduct. Every patrol vehicle in the precinct was now equipped with live-feed dashcams and mandatory audio logging. More significantly, the Community Oversight Board was officially ratified by City Council. For the first time, citizens, not just officials, had a direct line to review misconduct cases. Derek was asked to join the board as a founding member. At first, he hesitated. "I'm not a lawyer, I'm not even political," he told Evelyn. "But you're the reason we're here," she said. "You've seen what the system looks like from the ground up. We need your voice, not your resume," he agreed. In their living room that evening, Amira sat on the floor, using her crayons to draw a picture. A smiling family holding hands at the park, a big rainbow stretching above them. At the corner of the page, she scribbled, "My daddy is not scary, he is brave." Derek read it, blinked hard, and handed it to Jasmine. "I think we're raising someone stronger than both of us." That night, Evelyn appeared on a national news program, asked to summarize the moment Brookridge was living through. She looked directly into the camera. "We didn't expose a few bad apples. We revealed a warehouse of rot. But what we're doing now isn't just tearing it down, it's building something better in its place." Back at the courthouse, court officials posted the date for final arguments. The case had moved faster than expected, thanks to the overwhelming evidence and growing pressure. The People versus Whitmore and the city of Brookridge would reach conclusion in 7 days. Mateo read the notice aloud at the community center. "One more week," he said. "One more chance to speak. Then it's history." Jasmine looked toward Derek. "You're going to testify, aren't you?" He paused, then nodded. "Yeah, they started this story with me. I'm going to help finish it. Because when a community refuses to look away, justice stops being a dream and starts becoming a decision." The courtroom was silent as Derek Lawson stepped up to the witness stand. He adjusted the microphone slowly, eyes scanning the room. Federal judges, opposing attorneys, reporters, and strangers all stared back. But just behind them, in the first row, sat Jasmine. Amira sat beside her, wearing a small blazer and holding Eli's hand. Evelyn gave Derek a simple nod from the legal table. He took a breath. "My name is Derek Lawson. I'm a father, a husband, a neighbor. And on a sunny afternoon, I was arrested for standing in a park while black." The courtroom didn't move. He continued, "I wasn't yelling. I wasn't holding anything threatening. I was watching my daughter go down the slide, and still I was treated like a danger. in front of my children, without a single question. He paused, voice steady. I'm not the only one this happened to. I just happened to be seen. He explained how Officer Milton never gave a reason, how he'd been shoved, cuffed, humiliated, how his daughter had nightmares for weeks, how Eli stopped playing outside altogether. Then he turned toward the judge and the jury. I don't want sympathy. I don't need an apology. I want change. I want a world where my children don't flinch at sirens, where being a dad in public isn't a risk, where the system that broke us finally answers for it. Evelyn stood. Mr. Lawson, why did you choose to testify? Derek glanced at his family. Because if I stayed silent, it would have meant they won. He stepped down. The courtroom didn't applaud, but it didn't have to. The gravity of his words hung heavy in the air. That afternoon, the prosecution presented closing arguments. Evelyn's voice was calm but sharp like a scalpel. You've heard the recordings, you've seen the documents, you've listened to victims. This case is not about a single corrupt officer or one ambitious district attorney. It is about a structure that punished the innocent and protected the powerful. She gestured toward the jury. You are not just deciding if the law was broken. You are deciding if the law can be trusted again. The defense leaned on technicalities, procedural nuances, internal miscommunications, legal gray areas, but their words rang hollow. Whitmore no longer appeared confident. He didn't even lift his head during the closing. Outside, a sea of people gathered around the courthouse, holding candles and standing in silence. This wasn't a protest anymore. It was a vigil, a city waiting to exhale. Later that evening, as the jury retired to deliberate, Evelyn, Derek, Jasmine, and Mateo walked quietly through the park, the same park where it all began. Children played nearby. The slide was still there. But now, new benches had been installed, each with bronze plaques. One read, "In honor of fathers who never gave up." Mateo looked toward Evelyn. You think the jury will do the right thing? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she watched Amira climb to the top of the slide, Eli close behind. I think, she said finally, they already have. Back at the courthouse, a light remained on in the jury room. Papers shuffled. Voices debated. History balanced on a verdict not yet spoken. Because justice isn't just a verdict. It's what happens when truth refuses to be buried. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded before sunrise. Families stood side by side with activists, clergy, students, teachers. There were no chants this time, just silence. A unified, heavy silence. The kind that wraps around a city when it knows it's standing on the edge of something bigger than itself. Inside, the jury filed in. Derek Lawson sat between Jasmine and Evelyn. Mateo sat just behind them, holding a folded piece of paper with names written on it. Names of every witness who had testified, every voice that had spoken up. Angela Marks was there too, sitting straight, brave despite the threats. The judge entered and gave a single nod to the foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. The room held its breath. In the matter of District Attorney Charles Whitmore, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. A collective gasp. No cheers, no shouts. Just a long, full exhale that seemed to release months, years of tension. The judge turned to Whitmore, who sat frozen in his seat, face blank. You are hereby remanded to federal custody until sentencing. Cameras outside picked up the moment federal marshals stood beside him. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He simply stood, walked, and vanished behind a door. The judge continued. In the matter of systemic civil rights violations by the Brook Ridge Police Department, we find the city liable for gross negligence, obstruction, and repeated failure to act on credible complaints of abuse and misconduct. The judge's voice carried more than just authority, it carried vindication. This court hereby mandates federal oversight of the department for a minimum of 5 years, the formation of an independent civilian oversight council with full subpoena power and compensation to victims as determined by future hearings. Derek closed his eyes. Jasmine squeezed his hand. The courtroom didn't erupt, but it filled with something stronger. Quiet tears, long embraces, disbelief turning into relief. Outside, when the verdict was announced, the crowd finally stirred. Hands went up. Some hugged, some cried. Some simply stood still and looked up at the courthouse with a kind of gratitude that didn't need words. Later that day, Evelyn stood on the courthouse steps to speak to the press. Her words were calm, measured. but they carried the full weight of what had just happened. Justice doesn't undo what was done. It doesn't unarrest Derek. It doesn't erase the trauma from his daughter's memory. But it shows us something more powerful than pain. It shows us that when truth is spoken over and over, even the loudest systems can no longer ignore it. The city declared the following Sunday Community Day of Reflection. Schools offered free seminars on civil rights. The park was renamed Lawson Square. Derek didn't want speeches. He didn't want banners. He just wanted to be a dad. And that Sunday, he was. He sat on a picnic blanket beside Jasmine. Amira and Eli ran through the grass, laughing freely. No sirens, no stares, no fear. Mateo grilled hot dogs. Evelyn chatted quietly with other attorneys about how Brookridge's case could serve as a national model. At one point, Derek looked around. Families everywhere, kids playing, friends reunited, and at the center, the slide. He smiled. Maybe it wasn't just about tearing down injustice. Maybe it was also about what grew in its place. Because real justice doesn't end with a verdict. It begins with what comes after.